Right now I can see the list of every connected sockets here in the left div, but all these sockets belong to the same user I'm currently logged in with. And what I want instead of these IDs is seeing the list of the currently logged in users' names here in the left div. In that case, instead of all these socket IDs, I would now only see one name, Adam, and if I open a new window and log in as Bill and go to the chat, then I will see Adam and Bill. And Bill can also send private messages to Adam, and that message will arrive to each socket, meaning each tab or window that belongs to Adam. So far I have stored the socket IDs in an array on the server side, and that's what I sent to the client, which then listed them in the front end. But from now on I will also need to keep track of which socket belongs to which username, and this array won't be enough for that. Instead of an array of socket IDs, I'm going to use an object of socket ID username key value pairs. Every time a new socket connection is established, a new key value pair will be added to this object, where the socket ID will be the key, since those are always unique, and the name of the user will be the value, so that I can get the username that belongs to a specific socket ID like this. To implement the chat functions with usernames, I will follow the same 4 steps I did with the socket IDs. First, I just want to display the currently connected users to the chat, then be able to send general chat messages with them, then entering and leaving rooms with them, and finally being able to send private messages from one user to another one. So let's start by listing the connected users. The users variable here on the server side will start as an empty object and not as an empty array. And to grab the username I'm using on the front end, I need the use context hook in the chat component so that I can access the username there. It will be a property of the user data object, which I'm using as a global variable across the React app. Once I have that string, I'm going to send it to the server inside of the update user event, which gets emitted upon rendering the chat component inside of the use effect. And I rename this event to user join because now it won't only request the list of the users, but it will do a little bit more user connection related tasks, like informing the server about the name of the user. The server will now listen to the user join event, not update user, and it puts the username coming from the client into the users object, which happens this way. To the socket ID key will belong the username as value. Then joining the socket to the general chat and displaying the users in the terminal will all happen inside of this user join event. So I cut and paste those from above, and I get rid of this array method too. After that, the socket ID username pair should be correctly added to the user's object, but I also need to make sure that it gets deleted when the client disconnects, which will happen every time a user closes one of the browser tabs or windows. For deleting an element from the object, I can simply use the delete keyword, and there is no need to filter any array anymore. And one last but quite important step for displaying the usernames is that here, where I emit the user list to the client, the list should consist of usernames without any duplication. Every username must be emitted once. To get an array of the values in an object like these users, I can use the object.values method with the object name as argument, and that will collect the value of every element without filtering the duplicates. To store unique values, I need to use the JavaScript's set object, which gets rid of the duplications for me. And if I send this set to the client can then use it as an array, which means I don't need to change anything in the front end. It will map through the list, just like it did with the array of socket IDs. So for testing, I open 2 windows, where I'm logged in as Adam, and an incognito window, where I log in as Bill. If I go to the chat component with Bill, I can see Bill in the list of the connected users. Then I do the same with Adam, both windows, but I can see only one Adam in every window because the duplication has been filtered on the server side. If I send a message from any of them, it still displays the socket ID, but I'm about to change that. Plus here I can also check the terminal, keeping track of all those happenings in the background. So if I want to see usernames instead of socket IDs, I can just replace the socket ID variables that go from the server to the client to users socket.id, which equals the username. And I make a similar change on the client side, where I set the chat message state, the value of the name property will be the username, which is stored in the userdata.user.name. I changed that here and also here in the bottom of the new message submit function. And then let's just do exactly the same as before, connecting with 2 Adams and 1 Bill. Now the usernames for the messages and for the news will be displayed in the right div correctly, so no more socket IDs. Now moving on to chat rooms, this will be actually the easiest step by far, by which I mean there is no need to do anything in this case, because one user can go in different rooms, in different browser tabs, and then each tab will send and receive messages individually, just like for the socket IDs before. So if a client goes in one room in one tab and another room in another tab, then those 2 tabs will receive completely different messages, even if the username is the same in both tabs. So if Bill is in the Apple room and Adam goes to the Apple in one window and Banana in the other one, then if Bill sends a message to the Apple, it won't go to the third window. Then if Bill switches to the Banana room and sends a message from there, then that message won't go to the Adam window that remained in the Apple room. Now as for private chatting, let's assume that if Bill sends a private message to Adam, Adam will receive it no matter in which room he's currently in. And the trick for that can be found in the socket.io documentation. Here as a sample use case, to broadcast data to each device or tab of a given user, it suggests that every socket should join in a room named after the user. So before joining a socket to the general chat, let's also join it in the room named after the user. That name will come from the client side. And now every client will be a member of 3 different rooms simultaneously. They will be in one of the predefined chat rooms, general chat, Apple, Banana or Carrot, which is useful for chat rooms. Then they will be in a room called as the user the socket belongs to. That way I can send a message to every tab a given user has currently open. And third, every socket also belongs to a room named after their own socket ID. That happens automatically, because that's how socket.io works, and it was useful for private chatting between sockets in the last video, but now I'm not going to use that anymore. Now let's have again Adam twice and Bill once here. Bill goes to the Apple room, so does one Adam. The other Adam goes to Banana. Then Bill sends a message to the Apple room. One of the Adam will receive it. Then if Bill clicks to Adam and sends a message there, both Adam windows will receive that message, since that message is dedicated to everyone who's currently in the room called Adam. It might be a bit confusing though that private messages look exactly the same as the chat room messages, so let's increase the user experience one more time by making the private messages red. The way I thought it can be done is, first of all, I write a new function called isChatPrivate that takes a room name and the user list as arguments, and it iterates through the user list, and if it finds out that the room name is also one of the user's name, then it returns true, meaning that yes, the chat is private. Otherwise it returns false, since it didn't find any username that is the same as the current room. For the chat message state, I add the new property called isPrivate, and that will start as false. And in the new message submit function, it will get a value based on the return value of the isChatPrivate function with the current room and the chat users as its 2 arguments. So the idea is that if there is any user with the same name as the current room I'm in, then I'm sending a private message to that specific user. In the server, where it emits the new message to the client, it will also include an isPrivate property with the same value as it arrived from the client, and then back to the client. When it gets the new message object from the server, it also adds that property to the message list state. And the reason it's useful to have that information in the message list is that here in the JSX, where I iterate through the message list, I can do conditional styling with the help of the ternary operator, saying that if the isPrivate property of the message list element is true, I want the text color to be red, otherwise it can stay black. And that's it, it should already work. Just a little security addition. Now that I check if the message is private or not based on the comparison of the current room and the names of the users, I want to make sure that no user can be registered as Apple, Banana, Carrot or General Chat. because that could lead to some confusion in terms of the message is supposed to be private or not. To do that, I go to the routes/users.js in the backend, and in the post register endpoint, I add a new condition saying that if someone has the desire to chat as a user called banana, then he will get disappointed because that's a reserved keyword. Okay, now let's do the same test again. If I send a message to the Apple room as Bill, it won't reach the third window. Then I send a private message to Adam as Bill, and since the Adam room is also an Adam user, the message will count as private, and hence it's being displayed in red. Very nice. Alright, now as always, the code of this web app, that now also includes the chat functionality, is on GitHub. Link is in the description, and feel free to try it out. I deployed it on Heroku. The link for the final app is in the description too. And please let me know if you have anything to comment on these videos, because it's nice to have some feedback. Okay, that's all for now. Goodbye.